Hey there, everyone. I wanted to go over values and the importance of values. So, thank you for those who responded to the post on what value is. And both of you were right. So, value is simply the lightness or darkness of something. And there's many varying degrees of light to dark within white to black. And that's called the grayscale. And value is what helps an image have form, or subjects that you paint look real. So value is really important. But what I teach and what this group is about is seeing color. So how do you relate value and color? So I posted in the group a while ago, and I've put it in the feature section, a chart, which is a value chart to help you get a clear understanding of the values of color straight out of the tube. And depending on the darkness of the color, you may add white to it and be able to go across many levels of the grayscale with that particular color. So it not only educates you with high eye-hand coordination, using your senses to ingrain it in you, what the values of a color can look like, but when you add white to a color, it alters it. So in some cases, it simply can dull it because you're taking color out of the equation. The more white you add, the less color. So that desaturates or takes the brightness out of a color and also lightens a color. It also, in some cases, will alter how a color looks. So, for example, with Cad Red Deep, for example, when you add white to Cad Red Deep, it shows up as a warm violet. So it can lean into the purple zone, but be a more red version. So if you have either looked at or even better done a color wheel, which is an exercise that I give my students in my course, you get to see and understand how colors work in terms of temperature. So you've got your primary colors of red, yellow, and blue, and the colors that are mixed in between those colors are varying degrees of warms and cools. So, for example, you take yellow and blue. In the middle of that is green. So green, just by the nature of having yellow in it, makes it a warm color. This is probably a topic I should cover in another video, but when you go from green to yellow, the warmer those colors get because the closer to yellow they get. And when you go from green to blue, the cooler those colors get because you're adding more blue into that mixture. So doing a color wheel is really important, but doing this value color chart really helps you see subtle nuances of color. And it takes practice and time, and there's really no fast track to painting every day or painting as many opportunities as you can, because it trains your eye. You see, your eye is being trained. It's not what you have perceived to be accurate, it's what your eye is really seeing. So this particular little video here is about value. And value and color relate to one another. This is a photo that a student gave me for an exercise that I gave them. And what I wanted the student to do was to find similar and varying degrees of value within this color photo, which can be kind of tricky because the color sort of distracts you. So what I had her do is to turn it into a gray picture. And there you can just see value. You see the lightness and darkness variations within this photo. The next step was to now break that down. And this is how I instructed them to do this. So you can see I have a yellow, I used a yellow color here to isolate out a particular gray within the gray scale. And you see over here, I've used that yellow again because I see some similarities there. Similarly with the green, you see I've used it here and I've used it here. So I found some similar traits to these areas and in addition here. So what I had the student do was to, first of all, break their values down this way. And the key to a successful painting in the very beginning is keeping it simple. Many times artists want to jump to detail. They can't wait to finish a painting. And unfortunately, you're skipping over some major important steps. So by isolating out major shapes for, and when you look at these shapes, you can see there's variations of values within them, but you want to use what I call the squint mechanism. So you squint your eyes, and that helps you to break down or isolate down a particular area where there's variations like that. And it helps you to see those differences. So once that's done, I had the student make a painting in black and white. Now, that is the only time that I allow or accept black on your palette is to do a grayscale like this. That being said, I have a student currently who has done a grayscale using dioxide purple because it's a very dark color. So this is another student's photo. This was something she chose, which is kind of complicated, but can again be broken down. And here you see it in the grayscale. And so you really can see some sharp contrasts. You can really see some isolations of certain types of grays. And this was a start. I didn't finish this, but I was helping her see how she could break down areas that had a similar gray quality. Doing your value chart is extremely important to being able to do this. And so when I teach my students, I have them do those basic steps first. It's kind of like math. And I learned this not being a great academic student. I found that I wasn't as dumb as I thought I was when I followed the steps in order. So with the math book, it starts out with naming the numbers. And from there, it goes on to the various steps of addition and subtraction and multiplication, all the way to algebra and calculus. And without those steps, I wouldn't have understood those other heavier sections of math. So this is the same with this. It's really important to do the steps for all of this to click. So this was something I had done for her in Photoshop to break down and give her an idea of how she could break her shapes down. And again, my whole method of teaching as it pertains to seeing color is to break the shapes of an image, whether it's a still life, a portrait, a landscape, a wave, whatever you're painting, to break it down into simple shapes before you get into detail. Detail is the cherry on the sundae, on the cake. It is the very last finishing touch. These are the most important steps. This is an example of a study I had my students do. This particular student was doing a block study. This is something I teach my students, using simple objects so that they're not bogged down with, a thing. The blocks are simple, and all you have to do is focus on color and value. So I thought this demonstrated really well when you take something like this. You see how bright that yellow is. So there's factors to consider. You've got temperature, you've got saturation, you've got hue, and you've got value. So these are 4 components that you have to be considering when you do a painting. And this yellow block was a real trip up, a real stumbling block, no pun intended. Because see how bright it is. It really stands out. Even among all the other colors, it really stands out. But when you take the color out, look what happens. It actually is the same value as this gray tablecloth. It's pretty amazing when you look at it like that. So it's really important to get a good grasp on value, because value is really important to the form of your overall painting, making it look real. Whether you do photorealistic work or you do impressionistic work, you want it to be believable. And understanding value is the key, one of the keys to making that happen. So I challenge you actually to find a photo and break it down similar to these steps and grayscale it, mark it out, whether you print it out and use markers or you do it on the computer like I did. I challenge you to do an exercise like this and see how you do. And post it in the group.